9. Now, Israel's President Isaac Herzog departs tomorrow for a very rare state visit to Africa, his second to the continent since taking office in a tightly packed 24-hour trip. Herzog will visit Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo, underscoring what his office calls the importance Israel places on strengthening ties with Africa. The visit to Lusaka follows a recent reopening of the Israeli embassy in Zambia, a move seen as part of Israel's renewed diplomatic and economic engagement across sub-Saharan Africa. Observers say the trip may focus on security cooperation, technology partnerships and support for agricultural innovation areas where Israel has long sought to expand its influence. We speak now to Dr Peter Wandwasi, Research Associate, Middle East and Africa Research Institute. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Hi, good evening to you and good evening to the viewers.
So let's just first start with these two countries and look at Israel's history with them in the past and why they're being seen as strategic for the President of Israel to make his second visit ever to Africa.
Thank you so much. I think we should straight the conversation within the historical context. The Israeli-Africa relations have had a long and rich history dating back centuries. It's not that it just started today. While there has been lapses, of course, of diplomatic engagement between the State of Israel and African countries over the past years, this historical relationship has indeed endured the test of time. You may recall the recent millennium has indeed witnessed a resurgence of heightened re-engagement between the State of Israel and African countries. This re-engagement has indeed resulted in increased diplomatic engagement between a significant number of African countries and the State of Israel. You may recall in September 2016, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, together with the Israeli ambassador to the UN, Dan Denon, met with African leaders on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly and proposed a re-energized engagement to discuss Israeli innovations in Africa. Prime Minister, indeed, at that meeting, proposed to African African leaders, that indeed Africa excites his imagination, and he proposed a partnership with every African countries. That same year, you may recall, on 8th December 2016, a joint declaration of intent to promote bilateral agricultural cooperation between the State of Israel and the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, in accordance with UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, signed a bilateral agreement. Now, in practice, Israel has engaged with various African countries over a period of time in implementing several interventions through state actors such as myself towards the realization of food security on the African continent. And you may recall, therefore, that in Kenya, they have actually engaged in innovative irrigation systems in semi-arid and arid areas of the Turkana region. So, President Isaac Herzog's visit to Africa is indeed a re-engineering of that historical relationship that has endured the test of time.
Okay, so when you talk about a re-engineering of that relationship, I mean, what we saw is the opening of that embassy in Lusaka occurred after, I think it's about 3 decades, so this means they're re-establishing a relationship. So surely there must be a reason that exists for them to strengthen relations, because they would have at some point been weakened.
Yes, indeed. I think recently we all realized that Israel has had quite significant breakthroughs in the technological innovations. particularly in food security, in advancing food security technological innovations. And part of that is actually to help African countries to strengthen food security systems and also ensure that they actually, through such exchanges, there are quite significant mutual benefit that would accrue towards both countries, particularly in the case of Zambia and Israel.
So then the question becomes, and it's a one-day trip of two countries. There's the strategic and there's the symbolic, but what will actually occur in terms of real strengthened relationships of which are equal to both parties? And I'm talking about the individual bilateral relations between Israel and DRC, Israel and Zambia, against a backdrop of very tense relations, particularly for the global south, given how Israel's actions in Palestine have been criticized and rebuked.
Yes, indeed. I think there is this re-engagement also enables a new story to be told and probably a true story to be told about what probably could have been misinformation that has been peddled against the state of Israel. I'm aware there could have been issues that perhaps have been said that could not have been true. But I think this re-engagement provides an opportunity for the truth to be told. And
okay,
this, I think, is the beginning.
I'd like you to just step back a bit. What has been the misinformation about the killings that have been occurring in Gaza?
I think what has happened is that there has not been significant truth told as to the cause that led to the engagement, the armed engagement of the state of Israel into Gaza. One of the things that you may have realized, there was the October 11 invasion, the October 7th invasion of innocent citizens who were indeed, celebrating on Sabbath evening. And, what one could have continuously learned from that is that there is existential threat that the state of Israel faces. And it is in their best interest indeed to protect their own selves. And I think that could have been some of the misinformation that could not have been told, that there was an invasion of Israel on October 7th, 2023. Yes.
So the diplomatic positions on countries like South Africa who've gone to the ICJ and others who support the action would then fall into, according to what your understanding is a misinformation, disinformation campaign, which would naturally, from what you're saying, suggest that it was no way that the Israeli president would have made a pit stop in South Africa.
I think there's need. I would imagine that there's a need for continuous engagement between the state of Israel and South Africa within the context of the case at the ICJ. I would also argue that I think conversations should continue to find out the lasting solutions. The historic part of this, which probably was not told, was that even the UN indeed through Resolution 181 petitioned the land of Palestine into two, one for the Jews and one for the Arab state. But the Arab state indeed historically refused to take that option. And that also signifies the historicity of the conflict.
And I'm finding your perspective quite interesting in the sense that you're framing it as Israel is having better relations with these two countries because of the misinformation campaign that you say is being peddled about what is happening in Gaza to Palestinian people. And is it from where you see perhaps a commonality in the framing of Christian solidarity, of ensuring that there is no risk in deepening religious or political polarizations in African society? So are you suggesting that Israel's visit is clearly aimed at that it's aware of the tenuous relationships that it has with, say, the African Union, for instance. You know that it achieved observer status, and that was something that was also not welcomed by many in the African Union.
I think there are great opportunities for continuous diplomatic engagement between the state of Israel and African countries, particularly those African countries that still believe that there are, certain information that they have not had access to understand the history of the conflict. But what I know is that I have been a student of diplomatic history, both linking the evolution of the state of Israel, but also on the other hand, I've understood that there has been a lack of acknowledgement of the fact that the state of Israel has a right to exist. And that has been one of the underlying causes. And if African countries and the broader South would wish to actually understand, it would be important to begin to engage with the state of Israel and have to ask them hard questions regarding the history and the underlying causes. Christianity plays a very significant role in unifying humanity. However, Christianity must also be accompanied by truth-telling. And part of this process is that when the president of Israel visits Africa, he's also ready to begin to engage with African governments and be asked questions, and indeed, I believe he will be able to answer this.
You keep saying truth-telling. So are you suggesting that any position that speaks to genocidal acts by Israel in Palestine is actually misinformation?
I think the definition of genocide is relative, depending on the perspective from which it is being propagated. But my view is that, there are always, occupational hazards in any course of war. And it is sad that indeed innocent people lost their lives as a result of the invasion.
On the one hand, you say it's relative. Genocide is relative. How many Palestinians need to die for you to feel that it needs to be denoted genocide? But also, you say it's almost as if it's an occupational hazard. Yes, it's a part of a conflict, and I think many people would understand that in wars, people unfortunately die. But is it acceptable? And I really am trying to understand you. And some might accuse me of, why am I asking you this? It's just the manner in which you're framing it that I'm really interested to know. Is your position that anybody that is critical of Israel and of its actions basically part of this misinformation propaganda campaign?
I think we must be very clear that indeed no one wishes the loss of life on all directions or even on both ends. However, there has also to be a recognition that states must actually, they have a right to protect themselves. And where there is a sense of existential threats that are mainly propagated against one state, that state has a right to defend itself. There are obviously people who will lose lives, and which is indeed regrettable that lives have to be lost on both sides of the conflict. And that should be something that all states involved must indeed work to avoid.
I think I am going to end it here because I really had not anticipated that we would be discussing this issue in that way. Dr. Wandwasi, and that is focusing on